Recalling ones, what are functions? They are user-made, reusable blocks of code aimed at a particular task. Now before we get into making some functions, I want to tell you two things. One, in programming terminology, whenever we write a function, we don't say that we are creating a function or making a function. We say that we are defining a function, and that is the first step in using functions. Function definition. The second thing is that whenever we use the defined function, we don't say that we are executing that function, we say that we are calling that function, and this is the second step in using functions, function calling. This terminology may seem a little confusing, but that is just how it is, and you have to get used to it. Now, let's see how to define a function. To define a function, first use the keyword def, and then we have to choose a name for our function. While naming a function, all the rules that apply for naming variables also apply for naming functions. Let's say I chose my function name as nothing. After writing the function name, you have to type a pair of parentheses and then a colon. Now let's define our function. Now you can observe that just after I press enter, it automatically got indented. This is the same as in conditional statements and loops. Now all the indented code belongs to this function. To make our nothing function do nothing, I can't just leave it like this. It will raise an error. So I will use the keyword pass as a placeholder. This just means to skip it. Let's run this cell. Now our function is defined. So let's now call our function. Okay, let's type nothing and execute this block. You can see that it is showing something. Function main.nothing. So what is this? This happened because this is not the right way to call a function. The right way of calling a function is after typing the function name, use that pair of parentheses. Now if we execute it, it did nothing, just like we told. But a function which does nothing is not very interesting. So let's create a function that does something. Use the keyword def. Now let's go back to our ATM example. Whenever you enter the ATM and use it, the first thing that it should do is to tell you hello or some kind of greeting, and then it should ask you to insert your card, right? So let's define a function for that. So I will name my function greet, and then I'll use the pair of parentheses and a colon. So what should this function do? It should say hello, welcome, and then it should ask you to insert your card. Now whenever the transaction is completed and the next user comes, we can just call this function to greet them. So let's execute this. You can see that nothing happened. That is because we did not call it. So let's call it. I just misspelled the word welcome, but that's okay. We can change our function anytime we want. So let's correct that and then rerun it. As you can see, it printed. So whenever we want to greet the user, we don't have to type two print statements. We just have to call this greet function. Right now, we are just calling the function, but we are not giving any input or taking any output from it. In the next video, we will see how to give input to the function and take output from the function.